The U.S. has shut down 2 embassies, one in Saudi Arabia, one in Kuwait, as Iran steps up its retaliatory strikes on American assets and allies across the Middle East. Both embassies hit by suspected Iran drone attacks, and there's also this video showing a massive inferno at one of the world's largest oil refineries in Saudi Arabia. The death toll for U.S. forces since the war began has now risen to 6 after a counterstrike against a U.S. facility in Kuwait. The State Department is now warning Americans to leave nearly the entire Middle East immediately. Let's go to Nick Robertson. He is in Saudi Arabia, where the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia has been attacked. What are you seeing? What are you learning?
Yeah, and I think just to follow up on what Clarissa's saying, it is a needle, an incredibly delicate needle to be threaded by the Saudi government here over what's happened last night. You had those 2 drone impacts right outside the U.S. Embassy here in Riyadh. There were no casualties as far as we're aware. There was some damage. There was a fire lit by those attacks. Then there was a report that more drones were on their way. The State Department issued a shelter in place for the embassy here, for the consulate in the west in Jeddah, for the consulate in Dhahran in the east, much closer to Iran, inside Saudi Arabia, to shelter in place there. And then that warning about a couple of other drones being in the air. Also, we had confirmation that they impacted. Saudi authorities saying that they intercepted other drones flying in. We know yesterday that the Saudis intercepted drones flying over an oil refinery. There was a little bit of damage there. They intercepted 5 drones, they say, around a military airbase, a Saudi military airbase just outside of the capital, Riyadh. There's a sense here that Saudi Arabia is getting drawn closer into what is seen as a U.S.-Israel war, where the goalposts, listening to the president, to others in the administration, a sense of the goalposts, if not shifting, are not clearly defined on what the outcome is going to be. But from here, a very strong diplomatic language again, calling this a violation of international norms to attack diplomatic premises, and also reaffirming their commitment to protecting their own security, their own citizens, including the right to respond to aggression. So it's strong diplomatic language, but again, walking a tightrope, reluctant to get drawn into a conflict that is putting out its tentacles, and they calculate Iran intentionally having these escalations by reaching deep into Saudi Arabia at U.S. targets.
I'm here with CNN Global Affairs analyst Brett McGurk, and I just want to reiterate what our reporters in this region have said. The U.S. Embassy now in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait City, they are closed. The State Department has ordered non-essential, non-emergency personnel out of the UAE, out of Qatar, out of Bahrain, out of Jordan, out of Iraq. And in addition to that, Brett, the State Department suggested that every American, basically almost anywhere on this map, get out if they can. What does that tell you?
Yeah, John, the last notice you just met, I've never seen anything like that. And what that shows is the threat reporting from Iran is off the charts. That doesn't mean they'll be able to carry out all their threats, but we're clearly seeing the intent of Iran to target Americans everywhere, not just drones and missiles, probably terrorism, various asymmetric threats. Again, I have never seen notice like that from the State Department. Every American across the Middle East find a way to get out of the region. And of course, they're on their own. They don't, civilian flights, as we just heard, might not be available. What is Iran trying to do here? Why are they doing this? Why are they attacking all 6 countries in the Gulf? They are trying to put pressure on these countries, which have close relations with the United States, to basically say to Washington, this needs to stop, we need to de-escalate.
Now, in terms of unprecedented, you've never seen anything like it in terms of ordering everyone out of the region. There are a couple things also that I'm not sure we've seen, which is in Doha, in Qatar, right here. The Qataris shot down, they say, 2 Iranian planes. That's extraordinary. I don't think we've ever heard that before. And then in Lebanon, the Lebanese government cracking down on Hezbollah, which is highly unusual also. This may be showing stuff's backfiring on the Iranians?
So let me break it down. I mean, strategically, 2 Gulf countries with the closest relations with Iran historically are, as you mentioned, Qatar and Oman. Iran again attacked Oman today, which is surprising, and Qatar shot down 2 Iranian fighter jets yesterday. Honestly, never thought I would see that. I suspect we will see more military action from these Gulf states, maybe UAE and Saudi Arabia, maybe today, over the coming days. I think that's something Iran didn't expect. And that shows this is having the counter reaction that Iran wants. This is actually galvanizing these Gulf states in self-defense, in unity against what Iran is doing. And you mentioned Lebanon. Again, strategically, the #1 proxy group Iran has had for decades. One reason there's been such deterrence against ever attacking into Iran is because of Hezbollah. They had hundreds of thousands of rockets and missiles they can rain down on Tel Aviv. Now, Hezbollah has been knocked on its back over the multiple conflicts that have been fought since October 7th. And yesterday, the Lebanese government, for the really first time, said all Hezbollah military activity is banned in Lebanon. That's something Iran does not want to see. So that is also that's the strategic picture, but tactically, John, the question is how long can Iran keep up this tempo of short-range missiles and drones?
Yeah.
And they seem prepared to keep it up for some time.
This is the Shahed drone right now, which has been such an effective weapon for Iran over the last few days, and for the Russians in Ukraine. Iran has been supplying the Russians with this. I do want to ask one other question about some action that the Iranians are trying to take or threatening to take. They say they're closing essentially the Strait of Hormuz. This is this shipping lane right here. It's just 20 miles wide, only 2 miles wide actually, where ships can go through. 20% of the world's oil passes through that, and you can sort of see the impact of that right here. These are the straits right here, another look. And this is a live look at all the ships in the region. And you can see right here, which is basically that bottleneck, nothing's going through.
Yeah, you're right. 20 miles wide, 2 miles for the ships. Iran has said nothing can pass. If that continues for a period of time, I think you'll see a significant effect on global oil markets. I would just say, I've been watching this closely. Oil prices are now creeping a little bit above 80. That's far above where it has been. But I just remind people, early in the Ukraine conflict, oil prices, global prices went up to 130 at one point, and we're hovering around 110. So keep this in some context. We have tools to keep the prices low. But again, Iran is trying to wreak global havoc, so the pressure comes down on Washington to pull back, and we'll see if they can succeed. But yeah, that is definitely a choke point. One reason I think the U.S. military went after the Iranian Navy, it's been announced, basically sunk every asset they have, was so that Iran cannot come out and mine the straits, which would be something that would be very difficult to overcome. So I can see tactically what Iran is trying to do. It is just everything they got, drones, missiles, closing the strait. But so far, at least what we're seeing from the Gulf states is unity and actually more inclined to work with us against Iran. But it's early. We're in the third day of this.
It is, but that's a fascinating development worth watching over the next several days. Brett McGurk, great to see you. Thank you very much.
So there were no sirens, no warnings. Those are just some of the new details that we're learning today about the Iranian strike that killed 6 U.S. service members at a civilian port in Kuwait on Sunday. There's video showing smoke rising from a makeshift operations center where the service members were when the attack happened. You can see it there off in the distance. CNN's Zach Cohen has more on the details that are coming in about this tragedy. Zach, what are you learning?
Yeah, Kate, we're told that U.S. troops in Kuwait really had no time to protect themselves before what's been described as a makeshift operations center at that civilian port took a direct hit from a suspected Iranian drone strike. Now, this is part of the initial Iranian retaliatory strikes that we saw after the U.S. and Israel began their war with Iran. And as you mentioned, the death toll now on the U.S. side has risen to 6 in total after the remains of 2 additional U.S. service members were recovered. U.S. Central Command acknowledging the increasing death toll in a statement yesterday saying, quote, as of 4 p.m. Eastern, March 2nd, 6 U.S. service members have been killed in action. U.S. forces recently recovered the remains of 2 previously unaccounted for service members from a facility that was struck during Iran's initial attacks in the region. It goes on to say that the identities are being withheld while the families are notified. But look, this is a reminder of what Donald Trump warned in his initial video statement when the U.S.-Israeli operation first began, that he expected there to be U.S. casualties as a result, and we are seeing that number slowly increase. And it's interesting, too, because we're learning new details about where these U.S. service members were when this strike took place. It was described to us as a facility that was described as a triple-wide trailer with office space inside of it, and that after the strike, there was fire still burning hours later. The walls were blown out. The inside of the facility, we're told, was completely blackened. So U.S. service members seem to have been caught off guard and by surprise by this Iranian retaliatory strike. And it's something that we do expect to see potentially more of as Iran continues to target U.S. military bases across the region.